Well, hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is David Mainville, and it's great to be here, and I'm glad we can talk about operational resilience. So over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk about how to put operational resilience into practice, where to start, how to scale it, and more importantly, how to make it stick. My goal is to leave you with a clear, actionable path forward. And for by any chance, if you want to go a little bit deeper in operational resilience, we'd be happy, oops, excuse me, we'd be happy to help. So if you want to reach out to us to set up a session, we'd be happy to do that. Just go to our website and we'd be able to do it from there. So let's take it away here. So before we get into the details of the presentation, let's take a quick look at what we're going to be covering today. First, I want us all to recognize why operational resilience starts with leadership, people, and process, not just technology. This is all about setting the right foundation for operational resilience. Next, we're going to understand how aligning the NIST CSF 2.0, which is the cybersecurity framework, with IT service management, and how that gives you a very practical framework for turning strategy into day-to-day resilient operations. And finally, we're going to take a look at how structured assessments and AI-powered reporting can really make it possible to continuously improve and scale your governance so that resilience doesn't become a one-time exercise. It's built into the way that you operate. These three steps, recognize, understand, and see, will mirror the flow of the session that we have put together for you here today. Before we dive into the how, let's level set on what we mean by operational resilience. So at its core, it's an organization's ability to anticipate, withstand, and recover from any kind of disruption while keeping your critical services running. But it's not achieved by technology alone. It's built through a strong foundation of leadership, frameworks like NIST and ITSM, and a cycle of continuous assessment and governance. Again, it's not a one-time effort. You got to put this into practice on a day-to-day basis. And increasingly, this isn't just a best practice or a nice to have, it's an expectation. Regulations like DORA, D-O-R-A in Europe, and guidance from bodies like the OCC and FFIEC in the United States are holding executives legally accountable for resilience. That doesn't change the definition of what resilience is, but it really raises the bar to ensure that you have resilience in place and that you can prove that you do it. So resilience isn't optional. It never really was. I mean, I go back into my career and reliability, availability has been critical in any mainframe or any IT operation. But today it's becoming even more strategic because there's regulatory and legislative implications to being resilient. And we really need to put this into practice in our organization. So what do we mean? What do we mean by operational resilience? Well, that's the ability to anticipate, withstand, and recover from disruptions. But let's take a look at why it matters. So last year, a single missing control, two-factor authentication, opened the door to a major ransomware attack. Healthcare operations around the US were disrupted. 1/3 of patient records were put at risk, and the financial impact was over $3 billion. And beyond the numbers, the human impact was immediate. There was delayed care, overwhelmed staff, and critical services coming to a standstill. Again, just because someone forgot to implement two-factor authentication, which opened the door to elevated credentials, would let someone install ransomware into the environment, and actually poor response processes allowed that to spread through the organization quickly before they could get it under control. Just a few months later, a faulty software update caused a global outage that hit 8.5 million Windows systems, most of those installed at the airlines. So airlines were grounded, services were disrupted, and the root cause wasn't a sophisticated cyber attack. It was a process breakdown. It became one of the costliest software failures in history. These examples highlight a simple truth. Resilience isn't optional. The stakes are real, and the costs of getting it wrong are enormous. So those examples make the stakes clear. So why does operational resilience matter for every organization? Well, first off, it helps protect critical business operations. It keeps things up and running when the light, rather than have the lights go out, even when a major disruption hits. It also enhances risk management and decision making. When you have the right framework in place, leaders have the visibility and the tools they need to act quickly and confidently. Resilience helps mitigate regulatory and legal risks. We go back to those disruptions I talked about a few moments ago. Those costs were real. I mean, people get sued over, when the healthcare system went down and records were put at risk, organizations get sued. Organizations face legal, fines. So frameworks like DORA and OCC guidance really set the bar of what kind of resilience you need. And it also elevates it to a board level responsibility. So really having a resilient framework mitigates risk and regulatory issues. And finally, it can actually help you build a competitive advantage. How so? Well, because you build trust with your customers. The more reliable and available your systems are, the fact that you don't have, security breaches or major outages actually builds a trust with your organization, between your organization and your customers, and it builds loyalty and it just, helps you do a better job. So it really helps in a number of different ways. So a lot of times, people bring this whole resilience issue down to security, or do we have a right, network operating and operating consoles and security monitoring? It's really, that's the how. A lot of people forget the what that needs to be done, and resilience really provides a strategic advantage to your organization. So when we talk about building operational resilience, it really starts with people, process, and technology working together. I've been in this business long enough to know that everybody gravitates to the tools. Oh, well, we just need to put the right firewall in place. We just need the right SCIM. We just need the right, vulnerability scanning software. That's going to solve all our problems. But the reason I brought up those two cases earlier is they had all the right tools in place. What they didn't have were the processes and the well-trained people to ensure those tools were being used effectively. So technology alone is not going to make you resilient. Of course, it's critical. It's imperative. You need the right tools. I'm not saying technology is not a piece of the puzzle, but without people and process, you're just not going to have the right framework in place. So the approach or the blueprint that we're advocating for building operational resilience in an organization is simple. First of all, you need to assess to understand where you stand today. Where are the gaps? Where are the holes? What do you have to mitigate to improve resilience in your organization? Then you need to design the right processes, systems, and implement the right technologies to basically close those gaps and to basically, ensure that you remain resilient. But again, this is not a one-time operation. You need to govern what's in place. So a simple framework of assessing where you are, refining, improving, optimizing your processes and technology to close the gaps, and reassessing on a regular basis will give you that foundation for operational resilience. So once you've got the right foundation in place, the question becomes what frameworks will guide us in building and sustaining resilience. So it's interesting. We took a very different approach, I think, from other organizations. If you're coming to this from a governance, risk, and compliance, maybe you're an auditor, someone in GRC, you often think about control frameworks. That could be, COVID or things like SOC 2 or all the various different control frameworks that are out there, Cloud Security Alliance. You kind of look at it from that perspective and tick the boxes. So on one side, there's all of these controls. We found that one of the frameworks that best encapsulate a lot of those outcomes that you're trying to achieve is the NIST Cybersecurity framework. It's one of the leading information security management systems globally, and it defines the outcomes that any organization wants to achieve to stay secure and resilient. But again, coming at it from a control perspective, it's easy to forget that those controls are delivered or operationalized through processes. So on the other side, we have IT service management or ITSM. Whether you're looking at things like, ITEL or other process frameworks, I'm just thinking IT service management, as a global term. And that is the set of best practices that govern how the IT services are designed, delivered, and improved. So if you think of something like NIST as the expectations, it's ITSM that operationalizes, that provides the engine to make those outcomes real. And this is what is going to turn strategy, what we're trying to achieve with NIST, into execution, the ITSM processes. And the good news is many of you have those ITSM processes in place today. Sometimes what's missing is that alignment between the ITSM processes and the NIST security outcomes, and the ability to identify where you might have gaps and be able to close those gaps to improve overall resilience. So just briefly, the cybersecurity framework is what defines the security resilience outcomes for the organizations. Many of you might be familiar with its core functions. We have identify, so we know what we have to protect. We have protect, so we protect what we know we have. We have detect, so we can understand if we have a threat. And this threat can be either a security threat or even just an operational threat. Then we have respond. So how do we put things into place to recover from anything that we detected? And how do you recover to get everything back to an operational state? And together, these really give you a good life cycle to manage any disruption. You start with knowing what you have and you take it all the way through to recovering from it. On top of that, there's another layer called govern. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. It's what leadership does to make sure you have the right strategy, the policies, and the procedures, so that things don't just become, a process on a shelf or a policy in a book, but it becomes part of the day-to-day operational practices. So you use this NIST framework to identify what it is you're trying to do and how you should govern it. And then you can align that with IT service management so you can operationalize those outcomes. And that's where these two frameworks really come together. And I think it's a big differentiator in our approach on doing it. So if you take a look at identify, there's IT service management processes that help with that function. Risk management to identify your risks, and asset management to identify all the components you need to protect. You can't protect it if you don't know what you have. Then you have protect. So things like change management, infrastructure management, release management, software development practices that build security into the applications, validation and testing can help you protect your assets. Detect, well, you have incident management, monitoring, and event management, so you can be alerted that you have something ongoing. Respond, well, you want to respond with incident management, problem management, service continuity management to get things back on the air. First, quickly from an incident perspective, and then more long-term from root cause analysis. Then there's recover. Do you have the right processes, the backups, the recovery facilities? Have you tested your DR plan? Is all that in place so that you can recover from whatever incident occurred? And finally, again, do you have the overarching practices? And that's where things like security management and supplier management come in to make sure you're governing how you work with your suppliers and governing your information security management system as a whole. So these are very tightly related. And one example, that might make this even more clear is how you translate a specific objective into a real world resilience. So NIST has many outcomes. There's, I believe, 208 outcomes in the NIST framework. One of them is making sure you have your inventories of hardware managed and maintained. Well, that's a great thing to have on a checklist. You can have all the policies in the world. But if you don't have an asset management process with a process owner, with an asset owner, with governance, with metrics, if you don't have that in place, how can you guarantee you're going to have an updated hardware inventory? So the real world means knowing what you want, but having the right process to underpin that outcome and to ensure that you operationalize it and achieve it. So process-driven resilience, technology alone doesn't deliver resilience. Processes create consistency, governance, and accountability. And in practice, the ITSM process is embed in resilience into your daily operations. And then the governance of that ensures through leadership that the outcomes are sustained. So it all starts at the top, right? Resilience is built top down through leadership, structure, and accountability. Executives really need to set the resilience strategy and they need to be accountable. And a lot of times there's a disconnect. You have the folks on the operational side, and there's really a disconnect between leadership and strategy. We hear this all the time. So leadership needs to be a big part. You can't be a resilient organization unless it's coming from the top down. Process owners, then, your process owner for incident management, for service continuity management, for change management, for software development. These process owners set the standards and integrate resilience into the governance and risk frameworks. They make sure that the organization is following the processes on a consistent basis. They delegate then down to the process managers who operationalize the frameworks. So you have a process owner for incident, problem, change. The process managers make sure the process is followed and managed and governed on a day-to-day basis. And of course, you have your staff and teams which execute those resilient processes and report on governance. A lot of times, we have disconnects between the executive layer and the staff and teams. The staff and teams are doing the best they can. But what they're missing is the coordination of ensuring we deal with incidents and changes the same way across the organization, or that we have, good policies for recovery and we have the right resources in place to achieve it. So again, operationalizing resilience means a top-down approach. The operational blueprint is really pretty straightforward, taking it from strategy to sustainable operational resilience. You got to start by assessing what matters so that you can identify the misalignments and weak spots. Again, you can't improve something until you know what's wrong. And an assessment is the best way to identify gaps and set a roadmap for mitigating those gaps. Then, once you understand the gaps, that's where you can build your processes and systems to support to not only close those gaps, but to support the ongoing controls that you're setting forth through the NIST framework. So it starts with assessing and then designing the right processes and implementing those processes in the right technology to sustain resilience. Finally, you have to govern for accountability. That's where you assign ownership through the process owners, the process managers, and measure the results. And then finally, repeat and mature. It's a continuous loop, not a one-time exercise. So with that, I want to talk about the next part of the presentation. We were going to understand and learn and finally see how you can put this into action. So what I want to do now is give you a demonstration of a platform that I believe is one of the most powerful, cost-effective ways to embed resilience into your organization. So let me just move over to another screen here. Oops, come back to this in a bit. So what we've done at Navvia, and for those of you who don't know, we've been in business for about 25 years, and we've been, under different names, availability, reliability. We've been working with resilience since day one, assessing processes, looking for gaps, putting the right processes in place to close those gaps, and putting a governance framework in place to help mature those processes and keep you resilient. So this is in the blood of our organization. And we developed a tool called Navvia to help operationalize that, if you will. So Navvia gives you the ability to survey your processes, looking for maturity gaps, and then designing and documenting resilient processes through our templates, which I'll come to in a moment, which can help you close those gaps. Identify the gaps and then use best practice templates that you can customize to build process documentation, procedural documentation, policy documentation to not only show an auditor that you have it in place, but actually to really do it, right? That's the key thing. I mean, we're not doing this just to have a book. We're doing this to have an operationalized process that supports the actual outcomes. So starting with assessment, and I really do believe this is one of the most cost-effective ways to actually do a resilience assessment in your organization. Because what we do as an organization is not only do we provide technology, but we provide you with the guidance to run the assessment because not everyone knows how to do an assessment. So with our product and with the included service, we can come in and help you operationalize it. So for example, working with a project manager, we can identify which parts of the framework you want to assess. Now, in this example, we have questionnaires for the entire NIST framework and all of the ITSM supporting processes. But you might want to focus just on a certain aspect of the framework for an initial assessment. That's really up to you. These questionnaires are really detailed. For example, the asset management questionnaire goes into things like the hardware inventory, software inventory, network mapping, supplier services, asset prioritization, data inventory, lifecycle management. And each of these questions, again, are provide you not only with a question, but the context of the question and things you should consider when answering. People would receive these questionnaires and they can provide a response of not achieved all the way through fully achieved, along with providing all their comments and feedback, and optionally attaching evidence if you wish to support how they basically assess that particular aspect. So across the 19 different questionnaires that cover the entire framework, we have many questions that are very detailed, that are mapped to all of the specific controls that allow you to capture a score, a comment, and evidence. So we will help you figure out which ones you want to start with, all of them or a targeted approach. We'd even help you figure out what groups you need to work with, right? Do you want to go to internal audit, executive management, InfoSec? Because understanding how different people in the organization rate these processes and functions is important because a lot of times in an organization, it's the disconnect between groups that's the problem, not the actual process. There might be someone in the organization doing a wonderful job and someone, maybe not doing such a great job. And they have two different operating modes when they should actually be bringing it together in one best practice framework. So we will help you identify what you need to assess. We'll help you identify the groups. We'll help you pick the participants and then work with your project managers to even have a kickoff meeting so that everybody understands why we're doing this. It's a great way of communicating and getting some consistency in the way that people respond to these questionnaires. And these questionnaires can be used in a couple of different ways. Just send the questionnaire, get the data back. Use the questionnaire to conduct an interview face to face, or use the questionnaires to guide a workshop. And again, depending on your situation, we'll provide you with the guidance so you can make the right decision on how you want to do that. Our tool supports the email message, how to pick the participants. You can launch the assessment, and then through our notifications, send out reminders. So there's a lot of great tracking. You'll know how many assessments you sent out, how many people you sent the assessments to, and whether or not they've completed it, and with some abilities to remind people to finish and send out the right notifications. A dashboard to see the overarching results, but then this is where it gets really interesting. It's the reports, right? It's the data. So we have in this particular project type 17 different reports that help you dive into the information that was collected. So do you want to see, for example, how one group in the organization, like InfoSec, rates the functions versus the overall score? You can see there's some discrepancy here, right? 100%, 83%, 83% versus lower as an overall score. Or do you want to come in and see basically a heat map of how your NIST functions were reported? Sorry, that just opened up over here. Sorry, where did that open up? Oh, here we go. A NIST heat map where you can see, if you're familiar with NIST, you might recognize these are the functions: govern, identify, protect. These are the categories. So I can see that I'm pretty good in identify, protect, respond. I have some weaknesses in detect and govern. And if I want to drill down even more into the subcategories, I can actually identify particular points where I'm weak. So for example, in identify, which is already a good score, I probably don't want to do anything. But in protect, which is 59, if I address this function, this one, and this one, I'd be able to get my score up, into the 70s or more. So the heat maps are a great way of identifying the gaps. And the nice thing is you can also look at the heat maps, not only by subcategories, by the individual groups. So you can focus in on a particular group in the organization. There's a lot of great reports. I'm not going to go through every single report, but I want to point out we report on the NIST functions at a very deep level. So for example, in the function scores, we can start at the function level for respond. We can go into the categories of respond. We can go into the subcategories of respond. So lots of great reports that give you scores. But then we also have reports that provide things like the comments that people provide. So if I want to go in and look at a particular questionnaire like change management, I can easily see that for a certain question, how people scored and what their feedback was and whether they provided evidence of compliance. So a ton of great reports that allow you to know the scores, the different perceptions between groups, the ability to drill down into individual responses and comments. But you know what? Not everyone is a trained assessor. Not everyone's done an assessment. You all have your own specialties out there, and maybe one of those is not assessing. That's where our newest innovation has come into play, which is the AI-powered assessment report. So the AI-powered assessment report consumes all that data, all the scores, all of the feedback, all of the comments, and everything comes in. And using playbooks that we created based on our consulting experience over many, many years, based on those playbooks, which is a way of guiding the AI, and also through just, you know, basic programming and math. So things like the scores, the standard deviations, that's just calculations. But the interpretation is guided by our playbooks and the AI to develop something that's just not a bunch of reports and graphs. It becomes a complete, I'm sorry, let me just bring this up a little bigger. It becomes a complete report that includes, you know, an executive summary, a methodology, the key findings, all the stakeholder feedback, an analysis of those findings and feedback, recommendations, and roadmap. So for example, in the executive summary, the assessment reveals critical operational resilience challenges stemming from inconsistent detection, weak process integration, and fragmented governance across both cybersecurity framework and the ITSM domains. Drill in a little bit deeper, we can see the methodology that was taken. So it basically comes back and it basically tells you which processes we looked at, the groups that were involved, and the people that were in the groups. Or drill a little deeper again. We got input from 5 stakeholders and 5 ITSM stakeholders from these different groups, and the report has surfaced 18 findings across those process areas. We can then drill in and see some high-level reports that show how we scored with an interpretation of that. Drill in a little bit deeper, we can see the variability across groups, where we can see how each group scored, things like standard deviation and group variabilities reported, along with an analysis of what that means. Drilling a little deeper, we can get to see that in Identify, we had 1 item under risk assessment. In Protect, we had 3 items in data security, identity authentication, access control, and platform security, etc., which broke down into some specific findings, which we describe in detail here. So we basically take the NIST lens, surface all of the findings based on our playbooks, and place them here for you to be able to consume and identify without you having to go through all of those reports and graphs and charts manually. We do that again for the ITSM lens, and we do it one more time for governance. Oops, excuse me. We do it one more time for governance to see how the governing of those processes, management oversight, those types of things affected those processes. And then provide you with a crosswalk. Oh, those are the findings. And then provide you with a crosswalk of how those come into play with each other. We go into some stakeholder feedback, where we assess and analyze all the comments and use those comments to give perception scores. And all of that information is then filled into, sorry if I'm going around too fast here, but fed into our analysis section where we basically analyze things. Then we take the analysis, we turned it into recommendations, and from the recommendations, we build a roadmap. The beauty is, though, although this is built through a combination of technology, our playbooks, and some AI assistant, Navvia reads every single report before we give it back to you to make sure it matches our quality standards and it brings our best practice knowledge into the equation. So there's no hallucinations or anything like that. We basically come back and validate everything. So once we run the assessment, with the project manager selecting the people, once we validate the findings, we run into report mode. We work with your team to validate this report, and then we can make any final changes to the report before you deliver it as a board-ready report to demonstrate where you're resilient and where the gaps may be. And that's how we can help. So Navvia by far is one of the most cost-effective ways because we've brought not only do we give you a tool to do your own assessments, but we analyze and present you with the data in the most cost-effective way. And it doesn't stop there because once you've identified those gaps and you go ahead to mitigate them, that's where our designer comes in. So for all of the ITSM processes that support the resilience framework, for example, risk management or information security management, we have detailed process models with detailed workflows. You can see this is quite large, each with descriptions, goals, objectives, inputs, outputs that support, and then the ability to tweak these templates and generate on demand different process documentation, training guides, different documents that would allow you to basically, well, here's our information security management process, all the way down to the different activities, description of activities, and more. So a full circle tool to assess where you are. We train you, we guide you, we help you, and then the tool and templates so you can take that and operationalize it in your environment. So that's the Navvia solution. So just to kind of wrap up here, the key takeaways. Resilience is a leadership issue. It's people and process first. We believe that NIST and ITSM are the best combination of frameworks that can help you drive resilience in your organization. You can start where you are. You can use a tool like ours to scale with our help, to assess where you are and to scale. And then use a tool like ours to assess, design, and govern over time. And that's how you can put operational resilience into practice. So on that note, I want to thank you all for your time today. I went a couple of minutes over. If there are some questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Yeah, thank you, David. So we have a question from Paul. So how long do these assessments normally last before they are completed?
So that's it. So I'm going to give you the typical consulting answer. It depends, right? The size of your organization, the complexity of your organization, and the approach you want to take. And that's why talking to us can help you build the right balance. So each questionnaire on its own could take about 10 minutes, 15 minutes to answer. There's 19 questionnaires. Not everyone doesn't have to answer every questionnaire because you can target them to different people. So you've got the questionnaire part. So here's how I would put it. Spend some time with us, get a project manager. Who do you want to talk to? And we'll help you because we have experience with that, right? We'll tell you who you should talk to and we can get the right people. Have a little kickoff meeting that can take an hour or so, where we just get everyone on the same page of what the expectations are from the assessment. Send out the questionnaires, give them about a week, maybe 2 weeks to respond. So over that time, there's not much happening other than people responding. Also, if you decided to do some interviews and workshops, we can help you with that. And using the same questionnaires to facilitate a workshop or an interview. So that can be done in that kind of 2-week period. So by the end of 2 to 3 weeks, you should have all the results back. All of the questionnaires, interviews, workshops. We would sift through those. Because of the AI, all the findings are surfaced very quickly. So we take those findings and we read it back to the project manager and the team. And then we can actually read those back to the participants so we can validate that those were the correct ones. So here we are kind of in maybe week 4 right now. And once we validate those findings were correct, well, the AI is already, and our playbooks and our guidance has already done the bulk of the work. So within a week or so, we can produce the final report. So the elapsed time might be around, 3 to 4 weeks. That can vary by depending on how many people you want to interview and how many workshops you want to run, or if you just want to do it, with the questionnaires alone. But the actual working time, you know, 20 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes for every questionnaire a person has to respond to. Anytime they spend in an interview, 45 minutes. Time they spend in a workshop, maybe 90 minutes for a workshop. Those things, would depending on how you want to approach it, would change the scope a little bit. But you can easily get one of these things done in a month. Hey, Heather. Thank you for saying it's a great presentation. So in addition to executive leadership enforcement of the best practices, is there automated enforcements that can be built into the model? E.g. tool won't allow you to create a workflow that's non-compliant with a control. I'm not sure if you're specifically talking about our tool or just technology in general, but there's a piece, and this is where maybe having a deeper dive into what we have, and I'd be happy to do that with anyone who's interested. But our tool, in addition to creating the process flows, also captures user stories and technical requirements. So this is where we can, through the user stories and technical requirements, and because our tool also captures controls and metrics, we can basically create a set of technical design specifications, which you can implement in a tool like ServiceNow, so that you do have basically the right controls in place. So I don't know. I hope that answered your question. But in the Navvia tool, the way you would do that is through facilitated design sessions, building the right user stories, and gathering the right technical requirements.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, she
Thanks,
mentioned
Heather.
it's in the Navia tool, so
I
thank
see
you.
that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this was a slightly new format for us today. Is there any other question? We tried to do this in a rather quick format. We know everyone's so busy these days, so I really appreciate your time, and I'll let you get back to your day. But I do emphasize, if you have any interest in a deeper dive, where we can really, go down as deep as you like, we'd be happy to set that up with you, and really show you how Navvia is the most cost-effective way to do an operational resilience or a readiness assessment for things like SOC 2 or DORA or any of the other regulatory frameworks out there. So on that note, I just want to thank you all for attending today, and I wish you a great day. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.